All right, quick video here, Mo, what I did to your car. 64 Impala. It's got a unknown vintage 350 in it. What I did for all parts lookup was just looked up a 74 Impala with a Chevy 350 4-barrel. And that's how I went about getting the parts I did. Here's some of the old parts took off. Had a points distributor on it. Older carb. That's what kind of started all this, was it was leaking fuel. And it had been rebuilt last year, is what I'm told. That carburetor fits this intake. This is the cast iron intake, and when we put on the new carb that you supplied, the problem is it doesn't actually bolt to this intake. So there could be a spacer underneath and an adapter plate. The problem with that is it's not actually meant to still flow into these holes as we had talked about. So like we discussed, we put on an Edelbrock aluminum intake with that new carburetor and switched it over away from the points ignition, which you can see all the points in here. This is very old school vacuum advance points distributor, and we did a number of upgrades here. So now what you've got is the Edelbrock 4-barrel carburetor on a Performer EPS aluminum intake. Put a new thermostat in, new thermostat housing. Hoses were in good shape. Now this carb was not just meant to go directly on this engine without any modifications. So we had to make a few minor adjustments. The throttle rod was bent heavily to fit the other carburetor. So when we switched, we straightened that out. Same thing with the TV rod, or the transmission kickdown rod. I had to kind of custom bend that to make that fit. Also had to adjust both of those, primarily the kickdown, to give the proper performance. With the distributor, we've got a Petronix Flamethrower Igniter 3 billet aluminum distributor and a Flamethrower 3 coil. The coil is meant with a 32 ohms to match this distributor. The distributor came with a cap and rotor installed. Pretty standard stuff as far as replacement goes down the road. That distributor is an electronic distributor, and it has the electronics built inside, so it still maintains the old school look with a distributor and a basic a distributor and a basic coil without it being the points ignition. So it's got the advantages of the modern technology, as well as not having to clean the points, and this car sits. Obviously, being 64 Impala, it's not driven year-round here in Michigan, so it's parked in the winter, which is going to make it a lot easier to fire this thing up year after year and be maintenance-free. So reused the spark plug wires, put in new AC Delco spark plugs, set the gap to 035, which is just a basic factory spec. It's not a super race car ignition. It's a nice solid ignition on here. Had to change a few wiring things to make it all work. There was a number of spots here where I found in the wiring that just wires were twisted together with electrical tape over it. So I did my best to put some heat shrink connectors on and eliminate a few of those things. Didn't exactly rewire the whole car or engine bay or anything, but just cleaned it up a bit. With the intake installation, removed the old one, cleaned the gasket surfaces, and then put on all the new gaskets. This intake was a kit that came with a nice hardware, so it's got the upgraded, nicer looking hardware. Had to add the throttle return spring bracket, because with this switch there wasn't provision on here for that. Mo, you'd wanted the chrome fuel line here, so we've got this Edelbrock. This is a filter. I did keep the second filter down here, so you've got double filtration. Should help you down the road. And then we've got the nice stainless braided fuel line. I put in a 90-degree PVC valve. The other one stuck straight up, so that line came way up and then around, and it just wouldn't have looked nice. So we put Put a few dollars in. I think it was like $7 or something to get that. And then the braided lines. Put in the vacuum line for the booster is a braided line as well, and the Advance for the distributor, that vacuum line is also stainless steel. And then we have it off just to finish the tuning here, but put on the Edelbrock air cleaner to match. It had a chrome air cleaner on it. It showed its age a little bit, but I wasn't going to replace it. I was just going to kind of polish it up. But once I installed it with this carburetor, the throttle linkage wanted to hit the bottom of that air cleaner base. So for, I think it was like $35-40, got a whole air cleaner, and then now it's nice. Everything's Edelbrock here as far as carburetor intake and air cleaner. Noticed when it was running that we had oil buildup. You can in fact see a little bit there, residue. I sprayed that off with brake cleaner. Took off the valve covers and found the gaskets are just deteriorating. I don't know if you can see that in the sunlight here. It's kind of flaking here. You can see also it's coming apart. I know you wanted the car today, so I just got whatever valve cover gaskets I could get. They're good quality. They're Felpro rubber. With this style valve cover, if there are any leaking issues down the road, I would recommend getting a steel core, and I can help you with that and order some up if these are a problem. Now, with this carburetor swap, the old carburetor choke used exhaust to tell it when to choke and not choke. That wasn't working anyway, but there was a line that went down to the exhaust manifold on the passenger side into a hole right here. So I had to seal that hole up because we didn't have that line going in there anymore. So I welded that closed as best I could. I've got a few techniques I use for welding cast like this, and I don't think you'll have any problems with that. There is a small leak down here. It's way in the back. I don't think it'll bother you. Also, in running it was pretty frustrating while tuning. The car would go dead very, very quickly. I could only crank it for maybe 15 seconds at the most, and the battery would be dead. So I load tested the battery, not knowing what we'd find. So I carbon pile load tested this and found it was okay. It's on the weak side, but it's okay. So I would recommend when you store it, just disconnect your battery cable. Just one or the other. Pull it off while you store it. That's going to help a lot in the longevity of this battery. That is a very good battery, the Napa batteries. But so then I was fortunate enough to be messing with it close to dark, and I did find the problem. I was standing right over here, and I saw sparks shooting forward out of the starter. So I don't know exactly what was wrong. I can only assume that the starter had a dead short in it. The brushes were shot. So we put a reman starter on there, and that absolutely cured it. She cranks over way better. And also what I was finding was, and the problem actually got worse the more I was running it, or starting it. It wouldn't want to start. I had very weak spark. I have a spark checker I put on the line. It had spark, but it was very weak. I checked voltage at the coil here, 12 volt in, and when I try to start, my voltage would drop down to very low, almost zero. Where that starter was just pulling that voltage down. As soon as we put the new starter on, bam, it just absolutely fired up and ran like a dream. So we did some tuning, and that helped with the accelerator pump and a few things. So short of doing extensive tuning, it really runs nice. Not to say you couldn't squeeze out 3 or 4 more horsepower with some more time, but that's not really what this car is about. So we did an oil change on it as well. So it's got fresh oil, fresh filter, synthetic 10W30, and a new oil filter. And let's see, what else?
We got new plugs.
I did mention that. New spark plugs.
No, the brass.
Oh yeah, we had to change a few things. The old fitting for the coolant line for the heater core came at a completely different angle, so I had to buy a 90-degree fitting there and plug this intake because it's meant to go in a number of applications. So like there's a plug down there and there's some in the back, so we just plugged those up nice. Should be good to go. It really runs nice. way better than when I first drove it here. So hope you enjoy it. And yeah, the power steering was leaking, Mo, as you asked. I looked that over. I tightened the lines. It actually looks like it might be coming out of a couple spots. This has a bit of a unique style system. It's got you can see the shiny rod way down there. A cylinder, a hydraulic cylinder that does the steering, and a valve down here. So short of going and putting a bunch of time and money into the steering box and the cylinder and those components, if you want that, certainly could do so. But the lines themselves appear to be in good shape, and you had mentioned that those were replaced before. So Mo, I think you got a really nice car here. It runs nice, drives nice. Hopefully this answers a few questions of what we did, and it was fun to work on. All right,